Anybody else had nightmares over that Killer Croc commission from Arkham Asylum? Just me? Okay. Got pretty hyped to see that McFarlane Toys is bringing back a little bit more love and attention to more video game related figures around the Batman Arkham universe, specifically Arkham Asylum, because I feel like that's the one that we feel like the most time has passed, and it's good to see a little bit of respect being given over to that game, especially since I'm in the minority who declares that to be the best of the Arkham series. And stemming from that game is arguably one of the more memorable villains and obstacles to come in the way of Batman solving the dangers of the Arkham Island itself, and that is Killer Croc, who lurks in the sewers and gives you one of the more terrifying missions to accomplish there as Batman. And it looks like they decided to give him the megafig treatment here in McFarlane Toys' DC Multiverse line, so he's arguably going to be taller than the traditional 7-inch. He teeters more about the 8.5 inches, but I will mention this upon the scale. Is it just me, or is he just a little bit shorter than Titan Joker? And I feel like maybe I need to replay the game, but from what I can remember, and I could be wrong, they were about the same size in that game as far as height. Maybe in terms of width, I can definitely see Titan Joker having a little bit more girth and muscle on that of Waylon Jones, but I always thought that they were on even playing ground as far as height, so to see that Killer Croc is just a little bit shorter than Titan Joker's megafig, it's probably just a little strange just to kind of see upon first glance. But as far as that traditional sculpture detail and paint applications that McFarlane is able to exceed when it comes to the bigger figures because they have more real estate to work with, I would say for the majority, Waylon Jones aka Killer Croc here is frankly no exception. You can see an awful lot of the plates on his scales and all the different little details and textures amongst his skin really coming through very well here in live action as far as the figure is concerned, as far as how it looks like in person, the paint applications of how the different shades of green kind of fluctuate from a really dark green amongst the back to a really light one in the front. I'll say probably the only thing I don't know how to feel as far as not necessarily designed for the character, because I know he technically does have this in the actual graphical representation in the in-game model as well as even concept art. But in terms of the figure, I don't know how I feel about the scales here on his chest, because you can kind of see it's got kind of like this bleachy kind of characteristic that I'm not in love with, because it may have been done on purpose, but there's something about it that just looks like my figure's bleaching out and it's washing out as far as color. I would rather take more saturated, layered on paint applications as opposed to one that just makes me insecure that the color's just kind of fading away, especially if I still have this figure in years time and I'm looking and I'm going, is that natural or is that something that has kind of eroded since the time that I've collected this figure? I don't know. It kind of reminds me of whenever there's certain Batman figures or humanoid figures from McFarlane Toys line that's supposed to have some kind of stubble, but instead of stubble it looks more like mud or dirt on my figure, but then when I try to scrape it away it doesn't come away because it's a natural paint application, but it just gives me that weird insecurity as a collector. And I feel somewhat similar here with the bleachness going on his scaling in his chest. But as far as everything else, especially the paint applications and detail for the pants, I like how the shading kind of comes across through here with the brown, but it gets a little bit darker as we get to what's supposed to be more of the wet parts of his legs here towards the bottom end, and then especially the braces amongst his ankles and his wrists. I really dig the way that these things look here in person. Very reminiscent of that traditional Arkham Asylum kind of design and aesthetic. It makes me feel like he really did, not only did he leap off that game, but it also gives me the notion that maybe someone over at Rocksteady gave McFarlane the go-ahead to send over a legitimate scan of the character, and that's pretty much what, for lack of a better term, McFarlane went ahead and 3D printed. Once we kind of come up from the back, you can see a little bit more of that scaling coming through, which, like I mentioned before, is probably my favorite part as far as the sculpting and the little etches of each particular scale working up its way towards the head. Not only do you have yet another little metallic brace there that looks really well, but also the face is awesome. I wish that we can maybe get a little bit more of those pupils, those very snake-like pupils or crocodile pupils inside of his actual eyes. You just get the little green all across the board there. But at the same time, from certain poses, it does look intimidating, and the way that they were able to edge out each individual tooth comes across really well. What unfortunately I looked upon and thought to myself, yeah, that's going to be an issue, is in fact that brace around his neck, because as detailed as it is, I knew it was going to cause some kind of restriction with the articulation, which I feel is Killer Croc's greatest Achilles heel, if you want to pardon the pun here, because despite being a megafig and despite giving certain joints better movement and better freedom to be able to fluctuate in different capacities because of the fact that it's a bigger figure and can afford that, the head is frankly stagnant except for its horizontal rotation. There's not really in the way of movement up or down or tilting from side to side. He can only rotate 360 degrees fluidly, mind you, but only in that way. And then as we kind of navigate the articulation for the rest of the figure, it's kind of a mixed bag, because on the one hand you do have, like I mentioned before, those joints that are going to give you much more fluctuated movement that feels better in hand than even some of the smaller traditional humanoid 7-inch figures, such as the ones on the limbs. For the shoulders, you get the traditional rotation vertically as well as extension from the sides for the arms, and then the top part of the legs are able to flex forward and back very freely, as well as very awesome rotation, clickety rotation towards the sides inside of the joint. You can see it kind of wiggle there, and then of course the proper extension to give him the splits there that you didn't know Killer Croc can do. And inside of the legs, you have really good joints for the knees that are able to bend all the way up, so he does got the dual jointed knee action going on right there, as well as those elbow joints that I don't remember Titan Joker having. I think he had the full 2 joints, but if I'm remembering correctly, Killer Croc has an exception here where he's got only one hinge to be able to bend at the 90-degree angle, but much like some other McFarlanes, they decided to give him the swivel inside of that elbow joint as opposed to the biceps. So that may annoy some people, because I know that some people prefer to have the bicep joints. For me, it depends on the character. For such a girthy one like this, like Killer Croc himself, I'd say it's fine. It doesn't necessarily have to have biceps. Then you get to the wrists, which kind of mimic that of the Joker, Titan Joker mega figure, where he's got that wrist joint that's able to rotate in place 360 degrees horizontally, but has a really good hinge joint that allows the hand to move inwards and outwards. Very, very good there. I would just say that unlike Joker, he's got that thing where only one hand is fisted and then the other one is open. But I knew that it was going to be an issue to give him a set of accessories, because obviously this being a bigger figure, he's going to require a bigger size. And because of that, I don't know if maybe there was a production budget issue or anything like that, but that's not really going to fly very well with McFarlane, and as such, we're dealt with only one fist hand and one open hand. And there's some poses that lend to that looking pretty cool, but there would be others where I would like to have the open hand on the right one, and vice versa. So I understand that Killer Croc didn't necessarily use any kind of accessory throughout the entirety of the Arkham series, so I wasn't expecting some kind of forced gimmick or item or anything like that just doesn't make sense to the character, except for maybe now thinking about it, that box that we saw in the Arkham Asylum end credit scene, maybe that would have been a nice little Easter egg. But I digress. However, I don't know what I'm really talking about when it comes to those poses, because good luck trying to pose this guy without that black circular base, because once we get to the feet is where I came across a little distinct issue that could potentially be my own figure in an isolated incident, or could be a widespread problem, and that is some major looseness coming across through the joints throughout the figure. It's not so bad on the top leg joints, but those arm joints, those top arm joints that I showed vertically rotating, are actually more loose than they appear to be on camera. And don't get me started on the feet. The ankles are not necessarily loose, but they're actually, on the contrary, way too tight that I'm kind of scared they're going to be breaking apart because of how hindered they are with those metallic braces, or pseudo metallic braces around the ankles. They kind of create this little constriction around the ankle joints that it doesn't really fully rotate 360 degrees, and just to get it to move left and right it requires some extra force. And then those toesies, you know, as much as I'm a lover of the toesies, they are super flabby. I don't know if they come across well on camera, but they just take a slight little bit of movement to just edge out. So that could create some unstable footing for such a top-heavy figure like Waylon Jones here. And I'll give him some credit where credit is due. You got a really decent ab flux here in the middle torso with an abdominal cut across the middle portion of the torso and a waist joint that fully rotates 360 degrees that at least allows for some counterbalancing when it comes to that possibility so that you don't have one weight leaning too much from one side to the next. So regardless of size or tier or what exactly kind of direction they're taking that particular character as far as their DC Multiverse line, I always judge McFarlane Toys in the same way as far as not only the visual representations, the functionality and accessories, but also the value. And with Waylon Jones, aka Killer Croc here, I appreciate the intention to shed some more spotlight on Arkham Asylum figures. Here's to hoping that we get more characters out of that line. I don't think we ever got a Harley Quinn from McFarlane Toys, but of course the underdog that we're all kind of looking at with very, broad eyes is Arkham Origins. Whether or not we get a Black Mask or a version of that Batman from Arkham Origins from McFarlane Toys line, that would be a godsend. Instead, we did get Killer Croc here, and though he looks really good as far as paint application sculpture, which we knew was not going to be an issue considering he was a mega fig, and that allows, like I mentioned before, designers to take more advantage of the size so that they can bring out more detail out of the mold. The articulation is nothing to really write home about, and the lack of accessories makes me think that this kind of just teeters on the line of simply just being a statue. Sure, you can kind of put him in some intimidating poses with one fist on the one hand and then the open one on the other, kind of make him look like he's menacingly reaching out for Batman or something like that. But I feel like if you do a very quick Google search, you can probably find another third-party studio or some kind of manufacturer or company that has also developed a much more realistic Killer Croc statue, whether it's the design from Arkham Asylum or one lifted from the comics, and you'll ideally end up with the same thing. So because of that, I'm going to be giving Killer Croc a modest 7 out of 10. I'd say that if you're an avid collector of McFarlane Toys and you're just teaming to broaden your Arkham Asylum collection with not only that original version of Batman, but also the Joker, then throwing this guy in along with Titan Joker will definitely satisfy your needs. But otherwise, it's not a full necessity or a must-buy for those that are very choosy about which McFarlanes they want to spend their money on. Especially when it comes to some of the mega figs here that are meant to be priced at a slightly higher tier. However, if that is in no way, shape, or form an issue and you do want to add them to your collection, then of course use the affiliate links in the description. They help with the channel quite an awful lot. You can also help with the channel by simply clicking the thumbs up button if you liked the video, or thumbs down if you didn't. But if you loved the content, make sure to hit the subscribe button to turn in for more McFarlane Toy reviews, Spider-Man videos, Batman videos, and the like. As always guys, stay humble, and I'll see you in the next one.